This is Her Buried Lives, written by Katlyn L. Duncan, narrated by Stella Hunter. 31. Jenny. When we get back to the house, the tendrils of the remaining numbness fade out of me. It's time to face the reality of who my aunt is. We're leaving tomorrow, my mother says. I don't care what Davina says. She can call me if she needs more information. I stumble over a thick root bubbling from the ground. Why not now? I can't stay here another day. It's too close to Valerie and whoever she's working with, the person who's carrying out her tradition of locking away innocent women inside of an underground shelter. I have to get the place in order. I'll bring the key to the lawyer tomorrow when they open. It will be first thing, I promise. What about the person who took Wren? He's still out there. No one is going to hurt us. She wants to scare us, but that can't stop us from living. A wave of imaginings fills my mind. A faceless person approaching the house with a similar mindset as Valerie. My mother thinks Valerie won't hurt us, but she's not the one stalking the town for another victim. By taking Wren, he has a taste for what Valerie does. With him, there's no personal connection to us to stop him from following through with what he craves. Movement from my side brings me out of it. My mother heads into the house. She disappears as the faces of those I've met in town flicker before my eyes. The copycat can be any of them. Memories of the kind smiles shift to knowing looks. My foot slams into the edge of the top stair and I stumble. My knee twists the wrong way and pain shoots up my leg. I blink out of the vision and grip the railing to balance myself. The ache in my leg lingers. I need to stay present as much as possible. A light breeze rustles the trees, catching my attention. I whirl around and scan the woods. The shadows ebb, pulling my attention to several areas as I spot movement. This isn't like my visions. My fear seeps into reality, forming bodies in the spaces between trees. What are you doing? I turn to my mother. She stands in the doorway with a cardboard box. The donation items. I thought I saw something. Honey, do you want one of your pills to take the edge off? No, thanks. I need to be present in case Valerie's friend visits us next. Help me get all these boxes outside. Are you sure we can't just leave the key here? If Scott has to come here to get the boxes, I'm sure he won't mind taking the key with him to Walter's office. My mother sighs. I don't trust leaving a key to this place. Who's going to break in? Jenny, I'm exhausted, and I don't want to drive today. We have to finish packing and cleaning. Let me get a few hours of sleep. It's not as if we could enjoy a vacation to Philadelphia after all this. I'll be surprised if she still wants to go after this. I'm not sure I want to either. I want the familiar comfort of our apartment. But with Valerie knowing where to send mail, I don't know how much longer we'll stay. I can drive. I'm pushing too hard, but I can't help the pulsing movement of my heart throughout every inch of my body. Her "this conversation is over" glare wins. After bringing all the boxes outside, I head into the kitchen to clear out the refrigerator. It's not until I open it that my stomach wakes. I can't recall the last time I ate, and I reach inside to grab the last of the deli meat, cheese, and condiments. We're taking everything home, and the refrigerated items won't last the trip. My mother moves through the first floor, opening drawers and cabinets in the living room, dining room, and finally the kitchen. I place the sandwiches on the table. That looks good. I shrug. It's a sandwich, nothing special. She tucks her body against mine. I rest my head on her shoulder and can't help the sigh escaping my body as if I haven't breathed in hours. This will be over soon. I want to reassure her I feel the same way, but I already know my mind won't stop until we're out of here for good. I debate bringing up another move, away from Ridgefield. As much as Ridgefield has been my home, it doesn't feel safe anymore. Not even the apartment. I'm not sure I'll ever stop looking over my shoulder. The only hope I have is Davina questioning Wren about who took her. If she can identify him, then we might get a head start. My thoughts shift, unveiling paths ending in foggy futures. There's no clarity, but we have to move forward. My mother and I have merged onto the same path, and I want to ease the responsibility to keep the secrets of this family buried from the world. I'm armed to take my role in this family, but no longer at the cost of chipping away at my mother's trauma. We eat a mostly silent lunch. The room illuminates more meaning than it had before. The ghosts of the past wander the space. A family sitting at the table. All three women watching the head of the household, wondering when he will snap. A version of the basement door opens as a young girl descends the stairs under the watchful eye of her father. A bone-shaking shiver breaks my vision. My mother is gone, her shoes shuffling in the living room. I don't know when she left. I inhale a breath before eating the rest of my sandwich. A sound against the window makes me jump. I whirl around. Droplets of rain pepper the glass. When did it start raining? I have no plans to sleep tonight, but I hope for a cool breeze brought on by the storm to ease into the possibility of a nightmare-filled slumber before our trek home. Thunder rolls in the distance. Seconds later, the backyard lights up with a thin electric arm reaching across the sky toward the woods. My gaze catches on the shed. A paralyzing ache lands on my chest. An extra shadow appears next to it. I don't know why, but I can't stop staring as I count down to the next hint of thunder. It rumbles again, and quicker than before, the lightning comes. The dark form is closer this time. I sprint from my spot and head for the back door. I can't think about how stupid it is that I'm going to see who is wandering in our yard during a storm right after an abduction in town. I need to know that it's not real. The screen door slaps against the side of the house, but I catch it on its trajectory back to me. Blackness swathes the yard, and rain sprays across my face and bare arms. The cooler air allows me to breathe easier, yet I can't take a full one. I scan the yard for the intruder. 2 more strikes of lightning illuminate the sky. The figure is gone. The moment the last one hits, a hand falls on my shoulder. I scream, whirling around. It's me. My mother holds her hands up between us. I didn't mean to scare you. I thought I saw someone. The words tumble out of my mouth as I race into the kitchen, closing the door behind us. I twist the lock and push past my mother to the front door. She follows behind, and her closeness eases the tightness in my chest. Jenny, I know this has been a stressful trip. I lock the front door and peer out the thin window beside it. A double reflection stares back at me of a scared woman who might be as twisted as her aunt. There's no one there. She's probably right. If I've learned anything, I can't trust what I see when I'm stressed with visions. A text lights up my mother's phone screen. She reads it. Oh, thank goodness. What is it? She turns the phone, revealing a text chain between her and Davina. We have a suspect in custody. I deflate against the door. My mother's closeness wraps me in a warm embrace, one which brings me back to a time when I was small and untainted by this family's horrific past. Another vision must have sneaked up on me, playing into my fears of the situation in Orehaven. I release a breath into her hair and inhale the fresh scent of her shampoo. Having her so close to me grounds me. I tighten my arms around her. I recall her offer from before. I think I would like to take a pill. She squeezes me. That's a good idea. I slam awake. As I sit up, my hand presses against my chest as if a weight shoved the breath from my lungs. The window calls to me as a whistling breeze snakes through the screen. Tiny bumps form on my skin, even though it's anything but cold in the room. The glow from the moon lays a white stripe across the floor, leading to my bed. I check my phone. It's 9 at night. One pill has never knocked me out that hard before. But I haven't been sleeping much. The stress from the last few days must have caught up with me. Dampness clings to my armpits and chest. I billow my shirt, allowing air to flow through. Across the room, the window calls to me again. I imagine the dark form from before now standing in the moonlight. I count backward from 5. easing my runaway thoughts. The police caught the person who took Wren. They have restored Orhaven to the boring, sleepy town it was before we arrived. But I get up to prove to my mind that nothing is out there. The lawn stretches toward the woods, unblemished by intruders or any form of nightmare. I settle on the bed and it squeaks under my weight. My phone sits undisturbed on the side table next to a stack of my clothes. I want to leave this place as soon as possible. Thirst clings to my throat, yet I can't force myself up again to get water. The leftover bottles are downstairs with the rest of our bags. Going down there will only wake me further, and no doubt a vision will take advantage of that distraction. After that, there's no chance I'll sleep tonight. I reach for my phone to check the time. My texts to Abby are still unanswered. From now on, I promise to keep her away from the sins of my family. My chest aches as I turn that final lock, vowing to keep the darkest parts of myself away from the one person who has never judged me. The longevity of my plan cracks under the weight of my future. I wanted to come here and realize that I could have a normal life with a partner and maybe children. My life stretches before me, a tightrope headed into the unknown. The longer I picture it, the more I mourn for the life that I pushed so hard for over this visit. Bringing a child into the world is my farthest desire. I can't pass my mind onto another person. Offering this curse will only cause more heartache for them. I shake away the thoughts and focus on the present. I pull up the keyboard when another message comes through. It's from Scott. You awake? Yeah. Wren's reappearance must have been a stressful time for his family. I appreciate him reaching out to me, and I long to comfort him. How was your mother? We're okay. It was a lot. An understatement, but he's been so patient with me. Is she sleeping? The question stops me. I don't have time to respond before another one comes. Have you checked on her lately? She's sleeping. You didn't look. A breath seizes in my throat. I count down from 5 and pinch my arm to make sure I'm in the present. I reread the text. The words are sharper than before. I stand from the bed, dropping my phone against the quilt. The creaks in the floor scream at me as I walk into my mother's room. The door is open when she's had it closed all week. I slow, not wanting to startle her awake. The quilt from her bed lies in a crumpled heap on the floor. The empty mattress stares back at me. I blink to make sure I'm not imagining it. Mom? I call out and wander into the hallway. The bathroom is empty and so are the other rooms. I bolt down the stairs. She's not on the couch, not in the kitchen. My already quick steps pound down to the basement. There's no longer any fear of the place where Valerie's imaginings took over her life. My mother is not there. Her name spills from my lips again. At first it's a normal call for her, but as I run upstairs and fling open all the doors just to make sure, I no longer care who can hear me. I scream for her. Blood rushes through my body, slamming my heart against my chest. My heavy breathing fills my ears, muting my screams. I stand in the hallway before running into her room again. I fling open the closet, not sure what I'm looking for. The space mocks me. Her phone is on the side table with her purse sagging on the floor next to it. The shelter appears at the front of my mind. That figure I spotted in the storm wasn't my imagination. For once in my life, I ignored what was in front of me. The visions have always steered me to avoid the bad, yet the one time I allow my exhaustion to distract me, my mother disappears. A vision of her dead in the woods breathes to life in my mind. I close my eyes and count down from 5. When I open them, the world is blurry from my tears. I shove her phone in the bag and shoulder it. Whoever Davina claimed she had in custody isn't the right person. Scott has my mother. He must have weaseled his way into my life under Valerie's orders, waiting there like a snake ready to strike. I race into my room to grab my phone. There's another message from him. It takes reading it 3 times to understand the meaning behind the words. Find her before it's too late. 32. Jenny. Valerie's cold eyes peer at me from my mind. Somehow she manipulated Scott to do her bidding outside of the prison. Now, my mother is in danger and I have no idea what to do. Rage echoes through my hollow body, curling my hands into fists. My heart thunders in my ears. Throughout the years, my mother wasn't Valerie's only target. She threatened my life to get us back to Orhaven. But my refusal to go along with becoming her murdering partner pushed her. I can't do this alone. I know where Scott has taken my mother. It's only fitting he carries out Valerie's screwed-up vision of what she deserves. I debate calling 911, but my mother has a direct line to the sheriff. I find the text from Davina and call her. Davina answers after the second ring. Nora, do you have any idea what time it is? She's missing. My mother is missing. A rustling sound comes over the line, and then Davina's voice loses the grogginess of sleep. Jenny, slow down. What are you talking about? He took her. Whoever you have in custody isn't the guy, it's Scott. He texted me. She's not here, he has her. Okay, I need you to stay put. I think she's in the woods at the shelter. Did he tell you that? I don't know why I hesitate. My mother's insistence to keep her past dead and buried is a habit for me. But that's not how we're going to save her. Years ago, something happened there. She told you. She told me you didn't know about the abduction. What abduction? You just said... I stop, wondering what she's talking about. The sharing of information among the people in town makes me dizzy. Valerie is orchestrating this from prison. We went to see her earlier. It didn't go well. Valerie threatened her, and now she's gone. A sob erupts from my mouth, thickening my words. I'm headed to the woods now. We're going to help. I'll call you when we have her. The line goes dead. I pull the phone away from my ear and it rests in my hands. While my pulse has returned to normal, tingles under my skin force me to my feet. A breeze snakes into the room, slightly rattling the windows. The woods block any light from the distance. My mother is out there, reliving the worst moment of her life, and I'm stuck here. I glance at the phone again, regretting that I didn't dig into whatever situation Davina was on about. The holes in the details are where my thoughts come to life in the worst vision possible. My mind flickers as a vision takes hold. Scott stands outside the shelter in the woods, staring at the door while my mother's muffled screams attempt to call for help. I watch him tilt his head back and laugh. His hand reveals a knife, preparing to finish what Valerie started all those years ago. I propel myself from the bed, desperate to think about anything but my mother dying alone in the woods. 5 minutes later, he texts again. You shouldn't have called the police. Those words pierce through me. How did he know? I didn't. Calling his bluff doesn't work. This is all because of you. Ren was supposed to die. Now your mother will take her place. I'll do anything. Come get her. You know where to look. With trembling hands, I call Davina. It goes straight to voicemail. She may already be on the way. I text her instead. He's texting me. What do I do? I wait several seconds before texting her again. He's going to kill her. I wait 10 agonizing minutes before deciding. Staying in the house won't save my mother. Scott's already angry that I called the police, but I have Valerie on my side. If he's following her footsteps, then I can plead with him. The visions overtake my mind as I start the car, and I don't bother counting them down. They ramp up my pulse and somehow comfort me as I speed down the long path toward the main road. With the visions firmly in place, I'm not lonely in this journey. They take the edge off the utter panic throbbing through my veins. Knowing every possibility will only help me when I finally confront Scott. I'm unsure what I'll do when I find them, but I know enough about Valerie and her twisted love for me that he might not hurt me. He resisted during long rides and spending time with me at the house. Maybe I can play into that side of him. Heat pools behind my eyes, and I struggle to focus on the road. I try to calculate when Scott could have taken her. Each second is crucial. If he leaves her in the shelter, I will find her and get her out. But if he has another plan, then I might already be too late. My vision turns fuzzy, revealing the truth of my mind. She's on the ground. Her body lies still on the forest floor, staring at me with unblinking eyes. Blood pools on the leaves around her, coming from an indeterminate wound. My mind doesn't care for the details of the how, only the aftermath. I press harder on the gas pedal. If there are police out here, then they can follow me to the scene of a potential crime. I check the rear-view mirror more often than necessary, waiting for a set of red and blue lights to blot out the void. A familiar ringtone sings from my mother's bag, and I reach inside to grab the phone. Wren's name appears on the screen. I pick up. "Wren, it's Jenny." "Where is Nora?" The tears that have threatened me since realizing my mother was gone overflow from my eyes. The road blurs and I balance my elbow on the wheel as I clear them. "She's missing. I know where he took her." "The woods?" "I'm on my way now. I already called Davina." "You can't go there. That's what he wants." "I have to. This is bigger than you, Jenny. Davina is already handling it. Come to the hospital. I'll tell you everything." "No." The need to save my mother overpowers my want for information. Besides, I already know what Valerie wants with my mother. She's going to prove her strength even from prison. "Nora wouldn't want you to go." The entrance to the woods where we found Wren appears. Even if I didn't recall where we were going, 3 cars parked haphazardly on the side of the road beckon me. I have to go. I hang up before she says another word. Scott's truck is the closest to the woods. I don't recognize the sedan or the boat of a car parked behind it. Davina and another officer? I can only hope. I turn both phones to silent and shove them in my pocket. My eyes drag over the seats, searching for a weapon. Nothing. My mother's phone buzzes from my pocket, but I ignore it. I can't listen to Wren right now. The reality of my situation won't help keep my mind clear. I get out of the car and head over to Scott's truck. The bed holds his tool bag, and the only choices I have for worthy weapons are a screwdriver and a hammer. I grab both. The hammer is much heavier than I expect, but I adjust my grip as I move toward the trees. My footfalls are like gunshots in the night. My eyes adjust to the darkness, but I stumble over exposed roots and other forest debris. I try to stay upright, but the longer I walk, the more my confidence wavers. Scott is much bigger than me. The hammer that slips through my damp fingers is a well-used tool for him. The moment he takes it, I'm going to be in as much trouble as my mother. The only hope I have is that Davina has him in custody already. My trek into the woods shows my dedication to my family, but I don't have the confidence or strength to go against someone like Scott. A twig snaps from my right, too far for me to have caused the movement. I stop, pressing my lips together so as not to reveal my location. Whatever made the sound doesn't make another one right away. It's just an animal, an innocent animal. I repeat the mantra in my mind. I step forward, pressing my heel into the ground before rolling to my toes. The purposeful walk barely makes any sound as I continue down the path. Up ahead, a flash of light appears. My entire body jolts before I pick up my pace. She's there, alive and well. I picture Davina handcuffing Scott's hands behind his back. Even better, his face is against the ground as Davina checks to make sure my mother is unharmed. I allow the vision to wrap around me like one of my mother's hugs. We're going to be fine. We're going home today, and we will never look back at this place. It's the first positive affirmation I've come up with in a while, but it's weaker than the morbid ones. I don't get the release of tension I do when I sink into the darker areas of my mind. The light ahead blinks out before a steadier light source appears. A fire. It's small, but it's enough to lead me toward her. As I get closer, I make out 3 forms. To anyone who might stumble upon the scene, there doesn't seem to be an immediate danger. 3 people at a bonfire seems innocent enough, but it doesn't explain that 3rd car on the side of the road. If Scott took my mother in one and Davina is the other, then where is the driver of the last car? My skin prickles as another set of footfalls approaches from behind me. I grip the hammer and whirl around. I wish for a pair of feral animal eyes to look up at me. Instead, I face Scott's chest. My body tenses, but I raise the hammer and swipe at him. He jumps back as I complete the motion. The hammer is too heavy to bring around again quickly enough. His hand jerks to the side and he grabs the handle. He pulls it from my weak grip and tosses it to the ground. I open my mouth to scream. I'm close enough to the others that they will hear me. Scott's hand covers my mouth before he pulls me to the ground. My knees slam into the forest floor as I writhe under him. I try to bite his fingers to loosen his grip, but he's like a vice around every important part of my escape. Saliva floods my mouth, and his leathery hands press harder against my lips. He suffocates my screams as his lips touch my ear. "Be quiet. You'll give away our position," he says. I twist in his grip, desperate for the fresh forest taste in my mouth and not his hand. "Please stop." My voice is muffled, but I speak anyway. "Why did you take my mother?" His body stiffens. "I didn't." "Your text." "He has my phone." "Who?" "Mike." "Mike?" "I'll let you go if you promise not to scream. I don't know what he's going to do if he knows we're here." I grind my teeth together and stare at the scene in front of us. I'm still too far away to understand what's happening near the fire, but if Scott is here and Mike is there with Davina and my mother, is Scott the threat? They could be a father and son team of psychopaths. He's willing to let me go. I have to work with that. If I can convince Scott that I trust him, he might let me go long enough to warn Davina. I sink into the moment. The world slows as his hand slips from my mouth. It rests against my chin, and I resist a shudder rolling through me at his touch. Mike took Ren. Davina has someone else in custody today, but once Ren woke, she told us everything. I went home to look for him, but he wasn't there. That's when I realized he took my phone. Ren told me everything about their past. I shake my head. Is that what Ren was trying to tell me before I came into the woods? He sighs, and his hot breath moves through my hair. There's a lot of shit neither of our parents told us. It's much deeper than our families, Jenny. I tried to call you from the house, but your number is in my phone. I've been searching for him all night. The shapes of the people at the bonfire sharpen. My mother is the one on the ground, while Mike and Davina are standing. None have moved since I arrived. What do we do? Before you got here, I was going to talk Mike down. He has a collection of weapons, not all of them conventional. By the time I got to them, he'd cleared most of his arsenal. He's planning something big. My throat clenches. Has he already hurt my mother more than I expected? We can't leave them with him. I know. You should stay here. Are you kidding me? I don't trust him completely, but the way he's hiding in the woods away from his father pushes me more toward believing his story. I plan to get all the facts when I can, but I need to get her to safety first. Stay behind me. He stands and offers a hand to me. My body aches from his attack, but I allow him to help me up. In Scott's presence, the visions of him hurting my mother subside. What's in front of us is worse than any vision I can create. As we approach, the details sharpen. My mother is close to Mike, her arms stretching behind her. He must have bound her hands like Ren. Fabric stretches across her mouth, keeping it slightly open. Davina and Mike stand several feet from each other. Davina's arms reach out to Mike, but she has a gun in her hand. Mike faces my mother, his gun pointed at her. I squeeze Scott's arm. He's going to shoot her. He hasn't done it yet. Even as a whisper, his voice holds a timbre that rattles in my chest. Davina's voice is smooth and calm for the situation she's in. Put the gun down, Michael. Not until she comes. She's not coming. I glance behind me. Who else did he invite to this twisted party? My mouth dries as my hand brushes against my pocket. I lift my phone. Scott's message. No, Mike's message. He's been watching us since the moment we arrived in town, waiting for the right moment. I rest a hand on Scott's shoulder, and he stops moving. He's looking for me. You can't go out there. What choice do I have? I can't sit back and watch him kill my mother. I won't be able to live with myself. My visions agree. There's no future beyond this moment. Not unless I create it myself. 33. Now. I tick the names off my fingers for the 100th time. I've been in solitary for at least half a day. If they expect me to give in to their will, they have no idea who they've locked in here. My memories of what I've done replay in my head, enough times to stave off any boredom they anticipate me experiencing. I don't know when I'll hear about what happened to you and Jenny, but I imagine the worst-case scenario for you, Nora. News will arrive soon enough. My hands move to the flat of my stomach, a place where new life lived for a short time, long ago. The numbness bleeds through me as my hands curl into fists. This world was never meant for her. I sink into the bed against the wall and lie down. When I go back to that night, I risk going too far, and I can't have anyone witnessing me at my weakest. My heavy eyes close as I tick the names again, falling back into the memory of that night. Nora, Davina, Calvin, Wren, Mike, Francis. Francis. The twist of his face that only appeared after he knocked back a few beers. That night was no different. He hadn't had a drink in the hours he'd spent driving home from his cross-country trip to Vegas. He was gone for 3 weeks with only one drunken phone call. That was when I told him what he'd done. My mother said I was always the practical one, though aloof was the word most referenced. She could never see the world through my eyes, nor my father's. He numbed our reality with alcohol while I reveled in it. Francis wanted me to get rid of it. I waited those 3 weeks while he blew all the money he'd ever worked for at the casinos and with other women. My world didn't crumble without his love, but he needed to take responsibility. What better place than with his friends as witnesses to his true character? I never intended to kill him, Nora. It's something I never said to you, but you should have known. But that's what happens when you push a person past their breaking point. It's how our father ended up at the bottom of the stairs, a few missing screws in the railing after more than enough drinks, a small shove to tip him over. Francis could have taken his part of the blame. Instead, his denial that we were ever together struck me even more than him hitting me during our time together. I could take a hit. Maybe it was how I experienced a version of love, but I was in charge of keeping new life safe. No amount of love could explain away another physical altercation. A strategic blow to the head was all it took. The way he cracked his skull against the rocks surrounding the bonfire only added to the claim that his death was accidental. But I wasn't taking any chances. There are moments in life where everything changes. A deep shift within my body straightened my shoulders. I stood taller than I had in years. The fear in the eyes of the others reminded me of my mother. Like then, I was in control. Whatever happened next needed careful consideration. The others fell to pieces in their own way, including you. Davina, the sheriff's daughter, tried to help Francis. He was already dead. But the innate talent within her to protect and serve threatened my ability as a mother. Francis was a well-loved member of Orhaven, mostly because of his family. The town would demand justice. Wren sobbed, wrapped in your arms. It was the only time I didn't worry about you. You feared me enough to keep her quiet, to protect her. Your relationship always eluded me, even though I read enough books to understand most human interactions. Then there was Calvin, headed to college in the fall, a full football scholarship resting on his broad shoulders. It would disappoint those in his life if he was part of a murder. That stain would never come out. Mike stood on the fringes of the group, a quiet version of Wren. His eyes were wide and unmoving from his brother's dead body. I stepped over Francis's legs, bumping Davina. There's no use. You killed him, Wren sobbed from the ground. Your arms tightened around your friend. You knew my ability to kill. Our father's death might have seemed like a nightmare of an accident, but you knew who you lived with. You saw him attack me. I forced the words out. I even threw a crack in my voice to convince all of you. Davina stood. The fire illuminated the doubt in her eyes. He pushed you away. I'm pregnant. He knew that. He's an abusive man, and I fought back. Davina glanced at Mike. Calvin fell to the ground, gagging before a spray of beer came up. When he finished, he coughed a few times, breathing hard. This isn't happening. I lean into his fear. You were a part of this. You didn't stop him. All of you did this. Davina dug her hands into her hips. We did nothing. You want to be an accessory? There was no force in this world strong enough to put me in prison while my child was on the outside. You were too weak to care for her, and she wouldn't stay with the Allen family, not when their son made his choice about my baby. Mike, are you okay? Davina sidestepped me to get to Francis's brother. Did she hope he would be the one to convince me to take the blame for this? Mike stared at the ground, his fists at his sides. His eyes darted to his brother, then back to his feet. He was considering both sides. I could work with that. He wasn't a good man. Mike looked at me. The world is better without him. Davina threw her hands at him. You don't mean that. It's not right. Her father's influence sickened me. An invisible line cut between me and Davina. It encompassed you, Wren, Francis, and Mike. Would Davina's strength of character tip Calvin? Their parents were more influential in Orhaven than the rest of us combined. Work the fear. The monster rarely came out when I was around others, but it would save me. I needed to press harder. Setting my sights on Calvin, he'd be the easiest to crack. Once I had everyone on my side, Davina would have no choice but to follow. As much as she claimed to have a strong moral and ethical line, she always caved to the crowd. If you tell, you'll be stuck here forever, Calvin, I said. His gaze snapped to mine and his breaths came quicker. His cheeks puffed up as if he were holding another round of vomit in his mouth. Watching Davina, I moved between him and Francis. Don't let her bully you. Davina's voice pulled him in. He nodded. Focus on me. As if the monster itself whispered in Calvin's ear, he turned to me, asking me to give him a better choice. You want to be like your grandfather? A doctor in a small town doing nothing with your life? We all saw what happened. Davina stepped toward me. Her forehead barely reached my chin, but her dark eyes bored into mine. If I was in any way weak, she might intimidate me. Too bad for her, I'd seen worse than her in my mind. The monster vibrated in my stomach, reminding me who I was doing this for. The truth will only destroy you, I said. Davina snorted. How? Guilty people go to prison where they belong. I expected nothing less from her. I will destroy your lives. It may not come tomorrow, but you will always have me hanging over your head. Tonight will stain any happiness you could ever want. Not if you're in prison. Davina always had to have a comeback. Screw Calvin. I needed to put this woman down before she destroyed my life even more than Francis already had. I'm sure your daddy doesn't want to know about your after-school activities. Davina blinked, harder than normal. I dug into that insecurity. How would he react to your distribution of drug evidence to your friends? I'm not selling it. Will that matter to him? Will you be able to look him in the eye tonight, smelling the way you do, without him accusing you, too? Val, stop. Your voice cut through the thick space between me and Davina. A glimpse of my future loomed before me. Keeping the secret of Francis's death wouldn't be easy, but revealing their truths would hold them accountable to their eventual agreement of what I needed them to do. You and Wren have been closer than best friends. I doubt Wren's parents will be happy to hear what really happens during your sleepovers. Wren's jaw dropped, and she skittered away from you. Your face fell. The same surprise that stretched across your face after our father fell down the stairs. I didn't do this to hurt you, but I couldn't risk her telling or you leaving.
Francis isn't worth all of this.
Mike knelt beside his brother.
He disappeared once. He can do it again. He hated this place. No one will miss him.
You're talking about covering up a murder. Davina's harsh tone softened, more resigned. She was almost there. Mike dropped his sweatshirt to the ground. Francis's unseeing eyes peered at the sky with a version of awe. His soul was gone, but his trouble remained. Like Father's death, I needed to clean up my mess. Mike's hands reached toward the flames, illuminating the hand-shaped bruises circling his forearms.
Francis was never meant to be a father. This was an accident, right?
Calvin cleared his throat. The sound made my stomach roll. I could handle death, but not him throwing up again. Morning sickness was the only downfall of the impending expansion of my family. Showing weakness wouldn't get me what I wanted. Davina inspected Mike's arms.
You never told us. Do you think he would have let me?
His eyes lifted to mine.
Are we all in? What do we say if someone asks about him?
Calvin sniffed and spat at the ground. I swallowed hard. We never saw him tonight. It will be easier than keeping stories straight. We get rid of the body. How? Wren's whine grated at my nerves. Calvin coughed again.
I'm not touching him. You're the strongest of all of us.
Mike took the words from my head. He would have been handy to have around at the time of Father's death. You were too young to help, and our mother was useless. Without help, it took a full day to get him to his last resting place. I glanced at the underground shelter. The irony didn't deter me from forming a plan. We need to get him over there. Everyone except Mike looked at the darkness. There's a shelter. It's hidden, and no one will ever find him. Mike chucked Calvin in the arm. The massive football player let out a grunt and shook his head.
No way, man.
We're in this together, or we're not. Davina's shift in tone surprised me. With her acceptance of the plan, I expected little resistance from the rest.
Calvin, you take the legs.
Mike positioned himself at Francis's head. He tucked his arms under his brother and lifted. His teeth dug into his bottom lip, and even though the scent of blood from Francis was enough to satiate the monster within me, I yearned for a drop of Mike's too. Both guys shuffled toward the shelter with me at the helm. Davina crouched by Wren and you, whispering soothing words. You didn't take your eyes off me. You must have seen the correlation between this situation and the one we faced years ago. Even though you didn't come here with me, you were too young, but that didn't stop you from questioning his location after I returned home, covered in blood and dirt. It was much easier to claim he had left our dead-end town and his disappointment in his daughters than explaining the truth about falling down the stairs. As much as we didn't need our mother, suspicions would have turned on her. Becoming orphans with the potential of having to move from our home wasn't part of my life plan. Like the others at the bonfire, all it took was a little coaxing to target the intended future. When we reached the shelter, Calvin dropped Francis on the ground.
I did my job. I can't be a part of this anymore. I'm going to have nightmares the rest of my fucking life.
Mike opened his mouth, but I put my hand up. It's not big enough for all of us. I'll take him the rest of the way.
Rest of the way?
Davina's appearance surprised me. She was sneakier than I thought. There's a crawl space in there. Shadows covered her expression. How do you know that? This is on my property. I balanced the truth and what I needed her to believe. If any of them stumbled upon my father's remains, there would be more questions and a possible dismantling of the already fragile situation.
I can help you.
Mike, the loyal soldier. He was the only person I could rely on. Davina and Calvin stood outside the shelter, silently witnessing us taking Francis into the open void. Without life, his body didn't move the way it should. It had been years since Father's death, but the heaviness of the body and memory weighed on me as I folded myself into the shelter. My grandfather had built it for hunting, but my father's secrets filled it for years after. No one knew about it except for us, and expanding that circle to these others was an invasion like no other. They would never return here without experiencing the full memories of their part in this plot. If they returned. The part I would play in their lives expanded with each second. The paranoia within me of the worst possible scenarios was a gift. Thick, twisted ropes formed between us, binding us together forever.
Do we just leave him here?
The voided space swallowed Mike's heavy breathing.
There's a crawl space. It will conceal the decomposition.
It sounds like you've thought about this, Davina accused.
Or done it before.
I silenced the beast. Mike seemed genuinely interested in what I thought. He would help me lead this group into compliance. I'm sorry for your loss. I was used to feigning emotion to my coworkers and patrons. No one ever suspected a librarian.
Me too. Francis did this to himself. He always pissed people off. I doubt it will surprise anyone that he's gone.
I reached for the door, which to anyone else looked like a part of the wall. That was Father's addition to the shelter. It was a small probability that anyone would find it on their own, but even less of a chance that anyone would inspect it for a hidden wall where he hid his secrets, and in turn, mine. The monster within me mused. The door caught on a rock, and I adjusted my grip on Francis's ankles as I shoved it aside. Once open, the tunnel revealed itself like a crematorium furnace. Mike or I could crawl toward the depths, but someone like Calvin would barely fit.
Put him down, I instructed.
Mike did as I asked and stepped aside as much as he could. Groans from outside showed Calvin's location.
You can leave now, I said.
Mike shook his head.
I can help.
You can, but I need to do this myself. There's not enough room in here, and Calvin needs reassurance.
They all will, he mused.
I suppressed a genuine smile. Those didn't come easily for me, but Mike would work for my affection. He wasn't as easy to look at as Francis, but I needed a partner who understood my urges, at least the surface ones. Little did he know he would do my bidding whether or not he agreed. Make sure Davina and the others get back to their cars. We need to stick to the story. Mike reached out to touch my hand but stopped a breath away.
Can I come by tomorrow?
We should keep away from each other for a little while. Mike's chin dropped to his chest. I stroked his hand with one of my fingers. The darkness inside of me felt nothing, but his eyes widened as if I'd given him a gift. You can call me. We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah,
he said. He shuffled outside and I closed the door behind him. I worked best with heightened senses. I closed my eyes to not distract myself and inhaled deeply. The imaginings fled my mind as I raked my hands over Francis's body. I pinched his wallet and tossed it toward the door. It might prove useful as breadcrumbs of his departure. I positioned his body feet first into the hole. His face was close to mine, almost as if we were about to kiss. I dug my fingers into his shoulders and shoved. He didn't move more than an inch. I adjusted my stance, digging the toes of my shoes into the dirt floor. If I knew I was going to bury another body, I might have dressed more appropriately. It took 13 pushes to conceal him. It was less than with Father, but not enough. As far as I knew, the tunnel was endless. Previously, I was smaller and able to get as far into the crawl space as my body would allow. Those memories pushed to the surface. When I had to do this again, I wouldn't have Francis getting in the way. Getting traction was easier the more the space caved in around me. The walls gave my feet enough purchase to push him further. It wasn't until I pushed 3 times with resistance that I went far enough. I ignored the hearty scent of decay in my rolling stomach as I scooted out of there. I went far enough that there were at least a dozen body lengths between the door and Francis. No one would ever find him here. Once I entered the exposed space of the shelter, I opened my eyes. The moonlight was like a flashlight, and I immediately closed them. When I opened them again, the light had shifted. Not the moonlight. You. What are you doing here? You moved the beam across the forest floor in front of you. This is where you put him. I raised an eyebrow at you. Out of everyone involved, I didn't expect you to be the one to worry about. I never knew, you said. Will you tell? I asked with warning in my voice. You shook your head. You already took care of that. Don't be so dramatic. I scrubbed the dirt off my knees and stepped out from the shelter. The scent of smoke and wood permeated the air. I inhaled deeply, replacing the scent of death with fresh forest. You killed someone, again. I'm the dramatic one? I couldn't help the laugh bubbling up from deep within. Relief that I got away with it again, coupled with a question from my naive sister. A sharp pain accompanied the laugh, almost as if it broke me to show amusement at her level. It radiated from my pelvis and rippled across my middle. It swiftly encored, harder this time, doubling me over. Val? I threw a hand your way while the other pressed against my middle. Something was wrong. Val, what's happening? Are you okay? I already knew, but I needed proof. I shoved my hand down my pants and found sticky warmth between my legs. You moaned louder with each second as I brought my hand to my face. The blood I shared with her rested between my fingers. Your screaming sliced through the air. I whirled around at you. Your mouth was closed, yet the sound still sang in the air. I brought my other hand to my mouth, understanding that the sound radiated from me and not you. My knees crashed against the sticks and leaves. I waited for the pain to shift to another part of my body, but it bloomed like a spider stretching out its legs. It pierced through my child, and I screamed until I no longer had a voice.